You sat down with Hakeem Jeffries for a big chunk of time this morning. I'd love to know what he's saying, if the talking points are the same, and what his demeanor was like.
There are some of the same talking points. What struck me going to the Capitol is how empty it feels.
Yeah.
You have leadership there, but the rank and file is not present, and there are some press conferences that happen. You see some folks in the halls, but it feels empty. And I think there's a general awareness that one of the participants in talks, should they happen, hasn't been that engaged with these talks and is getting ready for a major flight halfway around the world. And that adds to this frustration or this sense that very little is happening here. So I started off my conversation, which did last about half an hour, with Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, asking him just about the state of play and how much Democrats and Republicans are talking with one another. Let's take a listen.
As Democrats, we continue to make clear to our Republican colleagues that we will sit down with them anytime, any place, in order to reopen the government, to negotiate a bipartisan agreement that actually makes life better for the American people in terms of spending and funding. But we also have to decisively address the Republican health care crisis. We've maintained that position from the very beginning, before Republicans shut the government down and during the entirety of the shutdown, because it is a real crisis that has been created at this moment, particularly as it relates to the urgent need to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
As you and I are speaking, the House Speaker is doing a press conference just down the hall. What is the level of engagement? Do you pass one another? Are you speaking with one another? Are Democrats talking to Republicans right now?
The conversations have been very limited, unfortunately, because Donald Trump has not given House Republican leaders or Senate Republican leaders permission to negotiate, reinforcing the principle from our view that he made the decision to shut the government down. They want to continue to inflict pain on federal employees. They've done that from the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency. In fact, more than 200,000 federal employees had been forced off the job prior to the government shutdown. And this is something that we've continued to see them build upon during the shutdown. Until Donald Trump gets serious about reopening the government, unfortunately, we're going to remain in this situation, and everyday Americans are being hurt.
He's getting ready to take a trip to Asia. Is it appropriate for him to be doing that at this moment when the government is shut down?
I think that the president has a responsibility both domestically and throughout the world. However, what has been irresponsible is that throughout this shutdown, he's found more time to golf than he has to engage with Democrats on Capitol Hill. He's decided to try to steal $230 million in taxpayer funds from the Department of Injustice. Donald Trump and his administration have found $40 billion to bail out a right-wing wannabe dictator in Argentina and can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits to keep health care affordable for tens of millions of Americans. And on top of all of that, they are demolishing the East Wing of the White House in ways that have appropriately horrified the American people.
I want to ask you about potential off-ramps, and Tammy Baldwin, the senator from Wisconsin, Democrat, said Trump is the off-ramp at this point. Do you agree with that assessment, and has there been any kind of outreach or dialogue between you and the White House?
Leader Schumer made clear earlier this week that we have reached out to the White House again to indicate that prior to Trump's departure for Asia, he should sit down with Democrats to find a path forward, to reopen the government, to enter into a bipartisan spending agreement, and to address the healthcare crisis that Marjorie Taylor Greene acknowledges must be addressed, and that traditional conservatives who are in the toughest seats in the country have now publicly acknowledged this week needs to be addressed.
Can I ask you a question of congressional mechanics, and that is, can the Democratic leader pick up the phone, call the White House, and reasonably expect the president's going to take that phone call? Are you able to do that? And if so, what's keeping you from having that dialogue?
Well, traditionally, that probably is the case, but in this White House, that's very much unclear. Donald Trump didn't have a meeting with House or Senate Democratic leadership until 2 days prior to the government shutting down.
It's an extraordinary amount of time they've had to wait to have that conversation, the leader making that known to me over and over again during the course of that conversation. Look, there are a couple of kind of forcing mechanisms or pressure points here on the horizon. The first of which takes place tomorrow when a lot of federal workers aren't going to get their paychecks. I think he's aware of that. I think Republican leadership is aware of that. And then beyond that, of course, November 1st, which, at the beginning of the shutdown felt very far away. And there were critics in the Democratic Party saying, look, if you're going to make this about health care and the elimination of these subsidies, that seems kind of abstract because of how far away it is from the beginning of the shutdown. Well, we're there now, and I think there's some confidence on the Democrats' part that when a lot of Americans open enrollment and look at the prospect of their health care bills really going up, that's going to have an effect on them. It's going to make them perhaps more supportive of the shutdown from the vantage of the Democrats. We'll see what happens here. But again, not having President Trump there certainly limits what they'll be able to do here in the days ahead. Yeah,
we can tell everyone the government's going to be shut down for at least another week, basically, right? That's going to be impossible for now. This vote will fail today on the bill to pay those workers, and you can add another on the 1st of November when SNAP benefits begin to expire. And you wonder at what point there's critical mass here from constituent services boiling over.
It's clear that that's going to become a more roaring boil here in the coming days. It hasn't happened yet, and one of the reasons has been because you have Russell Vought, the head of OMB, who President Trump is fond of calling Darth Vader, picking up the nickname that he's gotten, who's playing, as Russ Vought calls it, budgetary twister. He's moving money around and trying to keep some people paid and some programs open, and so that's kind of the crux of why Democrats have opposed legislation of the likes that's coming up for the vote today, is that they don't think that the White House should be picking and choosing sort of how all of this unfolds and who gets paid. So they're sticking to that, and we'll see how long that lasts.
And you're making the shutdown effectively easier and potentially prolonging it.
And less noticeable, I think, to a lot of Americans who aren't seeing it directly in their everyday lives.
So you sit down with Hakeem Jeffries the day after the big New York mayoral debate. He said he was going to say something about an endorsement one way or the other this week. He's not ready, huh?
I really had my fingers crossed, because what he said was, I'll make an announcement before early voting starts, which of course is this weekend. And I said, did you watch the debate last night?
Yeah.
It was also opening night in Madison Square Garden when the Knicks defeated the Cavs. And he admitted he actually watched the last few minutes of the game and not the debate itself. He kept up with it. But he said to me that Zohran Mamdani's promise to ask Jessica Tisch, the head of the NYPD, to stick around is something that he sees as very promising. And the two of them, Hakeem Jeffries and Mamdani, are scheduled to speak today and tomorrow, he said. They've spoken twice in the past already. So he wasn't ready to make that endorsement during the interview today. But it does sound like he's cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of pressure on him. Yes, as the minority leader, head of the Democratic Party in the House, but also somebody who represents the 8th District in Brooklyn and Queens, to make his opinion known.
There's no half measure here, right? He's going to have to endorse the Democratic nominee, especially if he's up by, well, if 13 points in the latest poll we saw today, 30 in some polls.
Something I brought up to him stems from the interview that I did a few weeks back with Andrew Cuomo, the former governor and candidate on the independent line. And I said, look, he and I spoke, and I was struck by how much Andrew Cuomo kept saying, I'm a Democrat. My dad was a Democrat, almost taking up this mantle, even though, of course, he handily lost the Democratic primary. And I said, isn't there just an element of confusion here among the electorate that you have this independent candidate who's lost the Democratic primary doing that? I will say the minority leader seems to recognize that. So I feel like we're moving toward an announcement here. Again, the polls open this weekend, so time is of the essence.
Did this debate matter last evening? It looks like lines are so clearly drawn here, other than showing up to laugh at Curtis Sliwa one-liners. What's New York getting out of this? There were many.
I don't know that it moved the needle that much. I think you did see the two opposing candidates, Curtis Sliwa and Andrew Cuomo, maybe not working together, but training their criticism on Zohran Mamdani in a way that they hadn't during that first mayoral debate. So highlighting his inexperience, comments he's made on the Middle East. I could sense that Andrew Cuomo was doubling down on that experience question, really playing up the fact that he has had all these jobs in government and Mamdani has not. But as you say, the polls continue to show Mamdani with a very sizable lead here with not much time to go.
You mentioned the game. Cuomo, Adams sitting together. They're going to reportedly appear today. What's about to happen?
Going to get the endorsement. Got the endorsement, I should say, and that was quite a picture that we saw last night on the sidelines as Cuomo left that debate and then made his way to the Garden to sit next to Eric Adams. An interesting moment during the course of that debate where the moderators asked all three candidates if Eric Adams were to endorse you, would you accept it? And it was Cuomo the only one who said he would. And again, going back to my conversation with Governor Cuomo, He has a vision for how he thinks this will play out with him winning. I think he's acknowledged in recent days it's a trickier, difficult path to that happening here, but this is certainly one part of what he saw as needed to happen to try to get those voters who would have backed Eric Adams to throw their support behind him.
We'll have to play this, but we're going to talk about the debate with our panel coming up here. But Sliwa, would you accept the Absolutely not. Put that crook in jail where he belongs. He was ready for a fire. He's had the full makeover. There's no beret, at least on the debate stage. He's wearing a suit. This goes the way the polls suggest in our remaining 30 seconds or so here. What does he do next?
It's a great question. I mean, he's lost many races before and has remained a very prominent figure here in Republican politics in New York City. I think that will continue. He claims to have the support of working class people in some of the outer boroughs, and that's one of the chief reasons why he's not stepping aside despite some pressure to do so. So I don't think he's going anywhere. Perhaps we'll look ahead to the next mayoral race. We'll have to see.